Hello everyone, welcome to National Museum Scotland. I'm Martin Goldberg and I'm the curator for the early medieval and Viking collections. And we are in the exhibition space that currently holds the Galloway Hoard. We have a long-running acquisition program at the moment that we've been doing all this summer in order to fundraise for the Galloway Hoard and hopefully save the hoard for the nation. The first time that I spoke to you about the Galloway Hoard, we were looking at the top end, the first layer of the hoard and the lower layer and the richness of the silver that was in there. And I was explaining about what we'd learned from the arm rings that are in the hoard, how they're split into 4 groups. And there are, what I think, 4 people involved in burying that part of the hoard. Well, we're going to move into the other parts of the lower deposit, which are richer in some ways, but can tell us some really interesting stories. So this is the final group of what we call Hiberno-Scandinavian arm rings. They're much more elaborate than the ones that form the bulk of the hoard. And the other thing you'll notice about them is these are complete. So they're as they would have been worn on the arm. They haven't been flattened out and folded. But the curious thing about these is they're bundled together, and there's 4 of them. Again, 4. Like the 4 groups that we saw at the top. But they're held together by a smaller one at the back. They're almost bound together sort of symbolically into some sort of contract. So I'm starting to see groups of 4 in the material, and that's something that I find really interesting. You'll also notice it's a bit dirty, it's a bit rough and ready, and that's because it's literally as it came out of the ground. And one of the things that we're going to move on to soon is the conservation program that will clean up these things and help us learn a lot more about them. In the middle of that bundle of arm rings was a small wooden box, and in that wooden box were the 3 gold items that you see there. Now, gold doesn't need a lot of cleaning. It comes out of the ground shining and bright. That's one of the amazing things about it. So the Galloway Hoard, yes, contains a lot of silver, but it also contains the largest and most varied collection of gold objects that we've seen in a Viking-age hoard so far. So here we've got a gold, what looks like a thumb ring, a gold ingot, which is just a sort of easily transportable form of moving that wealth about. But probably the most interesting piece in this group is this bird pin. It's something that's really captured people's imagination so far. We don't quite know what sort of bird it is, but there are certain characteristics that make us think about a flamingo. One of them is this sort of long curved neck, but also there's a downturned beak. And, you know, with a bit of imagination, the pin itself looks like the sort of long, slender leg of a flamingo. But one of the other curiosities we've noticed is that the colouring of the gold has been changed. They've added something to it to redden it. And so that almost makes you think of the red or pink plumage of a flamingo as well. It might not be a flamingo. It might just be a creature of the imagination that happens to have certain characteristics of that bird. The flamingo is a Mediterranean bird, so it tells us about some sort of long-distance connections. Maybe somebody saw it, maybe somebody only saw it in a book, and that's why it's not completely realistic. But it opens up new worlds for us to explore. Now, the centre of the whole deposit was this amazing little vessel, 10 centimetres high, 10 centimetres wide, with a lid on it. The vessel was wrapped in textiles, and it was filled to the brim with a real variety of exotic and unusual material. So I'll show you some of the things that came out of that vessel just now. We couldn't put the vessel itself on display because it was wrapped in textiles, and the textiles, if we expose them to light and moisture and the air, they would begin to decay. And one of the things that we want to do is preserve this material, especially these fragile, more everyday materials like textiles and fabrics, because they very, very rarely survive. And it's only the unique preservation conditions of this deposit that have allowed these textiles to survive. As the vessel sort of corroded a little bit in the soil, it also produced the chemicals that killed the microbes that would normally eat away at the softer organic material like the fabrics and the textiles. So we have this amazing opportunity to preserve this material, but also to learn a little bit more about the everyday items, about different types of materials other than the gold and the silver which the hoard is so rich in. But we have been able to put some of the metals and the other minerals and different types of objects that were inside the vessel on display. So that's what is in these two cases here. We have a penannular brooch that is probably more familiar in the Viking-age Irish sea zone, so much more what we might expect, like the other elements of the hoard. But what we didn't expect were the Anglo-Saxon disc brooches, and particularly two very unusual quatrefoil brooches. This is the first hoard of Anglo-Saxon brooches from Scotland, so another first for the Galloway Hoard. The quatrefoil brooches in particular are really evocative. So they've got these lovely faces on them that with fantastic expressions. So that's Anglo-Saxon material, and again it complicates our story about the Galloway Hoard. This isn't just a Viking hoard. This has Anglo-Saxon material in it, it has gold material, it has a whole array of unusual beads, and a rock crystal ball, and an unusual mineral form called a geode. We've got more gold, a different type of ingot, a twisted gold rod, and a couple of other bits of unusual Anglo-Saxon metalwork. These strange hinged straps here. They've got multiple hinges on them, so they were probably mounted on something organic. They're almost like they remind you of a watch strap, you know, the multiple hinges would have wrapped around something. So those will be some objects that we'll have to investigate a bit more in the future. But anything that has textiles on it, and there were particularly two very unusual textile bundles at the bottom of the vessel, those are things that we will be pursuing in the future through our conservation and analysis program and through an extended research program, and hopefully we'll be able to regularly update you with all of those interesting new stories. Just one final thought: if you think about the number of objects in the hoard, which is over 100, and if you think that each one of the arm rings was worn by somebody, each one of these objects were made by somebody, then suddenly you're exploring hundreds of lives, people's lives in the past that we previously didn't know anything about. And I think that's what ultimately this story is about. It's not just the 4 people that I think might have buried it. It's all the people that wore these objects at some point. It's the places that they came from. It's the journeys of all of these things to come together in this particular moment. That's what I think is going to be really exciting for the future, and I hope you'll come with us and discover some of these things. My final word has to be thanks to everybody who has supported us so far. I hope you can continue to support us, and I hope you continue to be interested in the things that this amazing group of objects are going to be able to tell us about our past, about Scotland's past. So thank you very much. I hope to see you soon.